Try this for just 2 weeks. Seriously, give it 14 days and notice how your brain responds. Most people spend time, effort, and even money on taking care of their skin, their body shape, their weight, and their appearance. But very few stop for even a moment to think about the organ that decides how we remember, how we react, how we think, and how we live the brain. It's ironic because the brain is the very thing that makes us who we are. Yet it's also the one place where aging remains, hidden until problems finally surface. Because we can't see the brain aging in the mirror the way we see wrinkles or gray hair, we tend to ignore it until something goes wrong. Forgetfulness, confusion, slower thinking, or a sense that our mind isn't as sharp as it used to be. As we get older, our brain quietly changes. These changes are not dramatic at first. There's no alarm sound or sudden warning sign. Instead, it's a slow process that builds over years and decades. Studies show that in adulthood, the volume of the brain begins to shrink little by little, and the hippocampus, the central engine for memory, shrinks even faster. Meanwhile, the frontal lobe, which controls reasoning and decision-making, becomes less efficient at processing complex information. Short-term memory can decline in the mid-20s. Decision-making may slow in the late 20s and 30s. And many people begin experiencing tip-of-the-tongue moments, where a simple word refuses to surface, even though the meaning and context are crystal clear in the mind. These are not failures of intelligence, just subtle signs that the brain is aging. Just like the rest of the body, interestingly, not everything declines. Skills that depend on understanding, language, pattern recognition, and life experience can remain strong for much longer. This is why older adults often excel at making wise decisions, or solving problems that require perspective rather than speed. In fact, some types of intelligence improve with age, because experience becomes a form of mental library that younger people simply don't have. The important point is not that the brain ages, but that the speed of aging varies dramatically from person to person. Some people stay mentally sharp well into their 70s, 80s, and even 90s, reading, writing, discussing, and thinking with clarity. Others struggle with memory, attention, and orientation much earlier in life, sometimes even before turning 50. Lifestyle, daily habits, stress levels, and how much we challenge our brain matter far more than most people assume. One major factor that accelerates brain aging is midlife belly fat. This is not just about appearance. Between ages 35 and 55, visceral fat, the kind of fat that hides deeper around the organs, acts almost like a separate organ. Instead of just storing calories, it releases inflammatory molecules that travel throughout the bloodstream, eventually reaching the brain. Chronic inflammation damages blood vessels, increases oxidative stress, and interferes with the brain's ability to clear waste proteins. Over time, this can contribute to cognitive decline and memory loss. Many people think of inflammation only when their joints hurt or when they catch a cold. But inflammation can exist quietly without pain and still cause long-term harm, especially to the brain. Another factor is inactivity. A sedentary lifestyle doesn't just weaken muscles, it weakens the brain's support system. Muscles release hormones and proteins that protect neurons, help create new neural connections, and support mood and clarity. Without movement, those signals decrease and the brain becomes more vulnerable. Modern life encourages long periods of sitting desk jobs, long commutes, smartphones, and screens. All of this trains the body to remain still, and the brain adapts to that stillness by becoming less active as well. Smoking adds stress to the brain in a different way. Cigarette chemicals reach the brain within seconds, altering neurotransmitters and narrowing blood vessels. Over years, the cumulative damage hardens arteries, starves brain cells of oxygen, and increases the risk of silent strokes and microbleeds, events that may not show symptoms immediately, but accumulate into noticeable cognitive issues later. Smoking also affects how the brain manages dopamine and reward, making motivation and focus more difficult without constant chemical stimulation. Poor eating patterns are another driver of decline. Irregular meals disrupt the internal body clock that coordinates energy, hormones, and metabolism. The brain thrives on regularity, and without it, the system works harder than necessary. Diets high in salt shrink brain cells through dehydration and raise blood pressure. Diets high in sugar create energy crashes that exhaust the brain. And diets high in saturated fat damage blood vessels. Over time, this combination turns into a perfect storm that accelerates aging. Without a single dramatic symptom, just slow erosion. These changes don't always show up in obvious ways. Often, aging appears in subtle signs, forgetting simple words, recognizing a face but not remembering the name attached to it, feeling overwhelmed in unfamiliar places that once felt exciting, or struggling with simple mental math that used to be effortless. Many describe the sensation as mental fog or slowness, as though the brain is covered by a thin layer of dust that wasn't there before. Interestingly, if you notice these changes yourself, it often indicates that your brain is still functioning well enough to monitor itself. But if others notice and you don't, it can mean something more concerning. The good news is that there are practical habits that can strengthen the brain regardless of age. The brain remains plastic, meaning it can adapt, reorganize, and form new connections long after childhood. Neuroplasticity does not shut off in adulthood. It simply requires more intentional stimulation. Here are 5 habits that require no medication, no equipment, and no gym membership. They just require consistency. First, whenever you forget a word, write it down when it returns to memory, and read it out loud 10 times before bed. This reinforces the neural circuits responsible for language retrieval. By deliberately saving the word from fading, you tell your brain that this information matters. Second, write a diary by hand every night, describing what happened and how you felt. Handwriting is uniquely powerful because it requires coordination between emotion, movement, sensation, and memory, activating multiple brain regions at once, whereas typing is more mechanical and less involved. Third, choose 5 unfamiliar words each day, foreign, technical, or advanced. Vocabulary, write down their meanings, pronunciations, and example sentences, and practice them until they stick. Memorization trains the brain like weights train muscles. Fourth, practice sequence-based movement, such as short dance routines or choreographed exercises that require remembering steps. Sequence forces the brain to work across rhythm, spatial awareness, balance, and prediction. With repetition, the body learns the sequence, demonstrating that the brain and body are inseparable. Fifth, review your diet. Make meal times more consistent. Reduce excessive salt, sugar, and processed fat. Increase healthy fats, fish, vegetables, nuts, and oils that support the brain's cell membranes. These habits don't demand perfection, only steady effort. When the body moves, the brain moves. When the hands write, the brain organizes. When you learn new words or remember sequences, the brain grows stronger. In one story, a person in their late 70s who once loved writing found that words were slipping away. Instead of surrendering, they began small. Daily training and gradually regained clarity, independence, and creativity. Brain scans still showed aging, but their life showed progress. This proves that it is never too late to train the brain. The brain remembers when you move, when you think. And when you choose better habits, it remembers effort. It remembers change. When you finish listening to this, don't just find it interesting. Choose one small action and begin today. Give yourself 2 weeks. If you feel even slightly clearer, more awake, or more connected, that is your brain waking back up one small habit at a time.